Picture this. You're standing in a bustling marketplace thousands of years ago, surrounded by traders shouting offers, a sack of wheat for a pair of sandals, a goat for a handful of salt. No prices, no coins, just endless haggling and uncertainty. Now, fast forward to today, where a simple tap of your phone can buy anything from groceries to a vacation halfway across the world. What happened in between? How did humanity leap from the chaos of bartering to the smooth, universal language of money? The answer lies in one of history's greatest mysteries, the birth of the first monetary system. This isn't just a story about coins and paper. It's a tale of human ingenuity, ambition, and the invisible threads that bind civilizations together. The invention of money didn't just change how we trade, it reshaped the very fabric of society. Think about it, without money, there would be no cities, no empires, no global economy. It's the silent engine behind every great civilization, from the towering ziggurats of Mesopotamia to the marble streets of ancient Rome. But who were the masterminds behind this revolutionary idea? Was it a king seeking control, a merchant tired of haggling, or an entire culture stumbling upon a solution? The truth is buried under layers of time, waiting to be uncovered. And that's exactly what we're going to do. Peel back those layers piece by piece to reveal the origins of the system that powers our world today. This journey will take us to the dawn of civilization, where the first sparks of financial innovation flickered to life. We'll meet the unsung heroes whose ideas echo in every dollar, euro, or yen you've ever held. Along the way, you'll discover how money transformed from crude lumps of metal into the complex networks that fuel modern life. But more than that, you'll see how this single invention reflects humanity's endless quest for order, trust, and connection. So let's step into the past together, because understanding where money came from isn't just about history. It's about unlocking the secrets of how we got here and where we might be headed next. Imagine trying to buy a loaf of bread with a live chicken, or worse, hauling a sack of grain across town just to trade for a new clay pot. That was the daily reality for our ancestors, trapped in a world where commerce relied entirely on barter. At first glance, swapping goods seems straightforward, but the cracks in the system quickly appear. How many chickens equal a cow? What if the potter doesn't need grain but wants fish instead? The inefficiencies were endless, stifling trade and leaving entire communities at the mercy of coincidence. Enter the ingenious workaround, commodity money. Ancient Mesopotamians, facing these same frustrations, began using barley, something everyone needed, as a common measure of value. A fixed weight of grain could represent the worth of anything from a day's labor to a plot of land. Over in Egypt, gold rings and bronze tools took on similar roles, their inherent usefulness giving them universal appeal. These weren't yet coins or cash, but they solved the barter system's biggest headache by creating a bridge between mismatched desires. Suddenly, you didn't need to find someone who wanted your sheep. You could trade it for portable, widely accepted barley and use that to get exactly what you needed. But even these early solutions had limits. Grain could rot, cattle could die, and hauling heavy metals was hardly convenient. The real breakthrough came when societies realized value didn't have to be tied to the object itself, it could be symbolic. A gold ring wasn't just valuable because you could melt it into jewelry. Its worth was agreed upon by the community, a silent contract of trust. This shift from tangible utility to shared belief was the spark that would eventually ignite the age of money. Without it, the concept of a dollar bill, just paper after all, would never have taken root. What's fascinating is how these ancient experiments mirror modern dilemmas. Cryptocurrencies today grapple with the same questions. How do we assign value to something intangible? Who gets to decide what's trustworthy? The answers began forming millennia ago, when a farmer first handed over a handful of barley not for food, but for the idea it represented a promise, a measure, a step toward the financial world we know today. The bustling markets of ancient Lydia hummed with something revolutionary, not just goods changing hands, but small, gleaming discs that would change history. Around 600 BC, craftsmen in this wealthy kingdom began hammering electrum, a shimmering mix of gold and silver found in their riverbeds, into uniform discs, each stamped with the mark of King Aliat. These weren't just lumps of precious metal, they were the world's first standardized coins known as staters. Picture holding one, its weight perfectly consistent, its value guaranteed by the ruler's seal. No more weighing chunks of metal on scales or questioning purity. The stater was a promise, solid and undeniable. What made this invention so transformative? For the first time, value became portable, universal, and above all, trustworthy. Merchants no longer had to rely on the word of strangers or haul bulky goods for trade. A handful of these coins could buy silks from Persia, olive oil from Greece, or timber from Phoenicia. The stater's reliability turned Lydia into a commercial crossroads, with its currency spreading like wildfire. Greek city-states, impressed by the efficiency, soon adopted the idea, refining it with their own artistic designs. Even the mighty Persian Empire, after conquering Lydia, kept the system intact, proof of its brilliance. But the real magic lay in the symbolism. That tiny lion's head stamped on each stater wasn't just decoration, it was a declaration. The king's mark meant his reputation backed every transaction, weaving trust into the very metal. This shift from bartering with uncertain commodities to trading with state-backed currency was as revolutionary as the internet is today. It didn't just simplify commerce, it redefined power, placing governments at the center of economic life. Yet the Lydians' legacy isn't just in coins, it's in the idea they unleashed. Their innovation proved that money isn't about the material, it's about the collective belief in its worth. Today, when you tap a credit card or send a digital payment, you're part of the same system they pioneered, one where trust, not the object itself, holds everything together. The stater was more than currency. It was the first spark of a financial revolution that still burns brightly, thousands of years later. Long before coins jingled in pouches or bills filled wallets, the temples of Mesopotamia hummed with an economic revolution that would echo through millennia. Picture the ziggurats towering over the Fertile Crescent, not just as houses of worship but as the world's first financial institutions. Inside their storerooms, priests meticulously tracked mountains of grain, herds of livestock, and bars of silver not as offerings to the gods, but as the lifeblood of an emerging monetary system. Here, in the cradle of civilization, wealth wasn't just hoarded, it was measured, recorded, and exchanged with astonishing precision, the real game changer. Those unassuming clay tablets etched with wedge-shaped cuneiform, what looked like simple receipts were actually the birth certificates of modern finance. Imagine a farmer borrowing 10 shekels worth of barley to survive a drought. The temple scribe would press a stylus into wet clay, documenting the debt down to the smallest detail: interest rates, repayment dates, even penalties for late payments. These weren't just notes, they were legally binding contracts, some even sealed in clay envelopes to prevent tampering. Suddenly, promises could outlive the people who made them, creating a web of trust that stretched across generations. At the heart of it all was the shekel, not a coin, but a unit of weight that turned chaos into order. A merchant selling dates knew exactly how much silver equaled his harvest, thanks to standardized weights carved with royal insignias. This wasn't just about fairness, it was about scale. With everyone speaking the same financial language, trade exploded from local barter to international commerce. Silver bars from Anatolia, lapis lazuli from Afghanistan all flowed through Mesopotamia's markets, their values neatly converted into shekel equivalents. But the true brilliance lay in how seamlessly money intertwined with daily life. Taxes paid in grain funded public works. Temple loans with reasonable interest, often just 20% compared to later civilizations' exorbitant rates, kept farmers afloat. Even the concept of salary traces back here, with workers receiving fixed rations of barley or silver. This wasn't just an economy, it was a societal operating system where religion, government, and commerce fused into something greater than the sum of its parts. What's striking is how modern these innovations feel. Those clay tablets, they're the ancestors of today's blockchain immutable records ensuring transparency. The shekel standardization, a precursor to global currencies like the dollar or euro. Mesopotamia taught us that money isn't just a tool for trade. It's the scaffolding of civilization itself, built on trust, consistency, and the audacious idea that a piece of clay or a weight of silver could hold the promise of a better tomorrow. While Lydia and Mesopotamia were pioneering coins and contracts, ancient Egypt was quietly perfecting a different kind of monetary revolution, one built not on metal, but on golden fields of grain. Picture the Nile's predictable floods, turning the land black with fertile silt each year, yielding harvests so abundant they could feed millions. But here's where it gets brilliant. Instead of letting surplus rot in granaries, Egypt's temples and royal storehouses transformed grain into a living, breathing currency. Farmers deposited their harvests into these vast communal banks, receiving clay tokens or papyrus receipts in return, a slip of paper that could be traded for tools, linen, or even labor. Suddenly, a farmer's wealth wasn't tied to perishable crops in his barn. It existed as a number in a ledger, as durable as the pyramids themselves. This system only worked because of something far more powerful than grain, the unshakable authority of the pharaoh. Every receipt, every transaction, every measurement of barley carried the implicit guarantee of the state. When a merchant in Memphis accepted a grain chit from Thebes, it wasn't just paper. It was trust in a system backed by the might of a centralized government. The pharaoh's overseers standardized measures, punished fraud, and ensured granaries were stocked, turning Egypt into a well-oiled economic machine. Unlike Mesopotamia's city-states or Lydia's merchant class, Egypt's monetary system was inseparable from its political hierarchy. Money wasn't just a tool, it was an extension of royal power, binding every farmer, scribe, and artisan to the crown. What's astonishing is how this ancient model mirrors modern central banking. Those grain receipts, they functioned like early government bonds, with the state acting as both guarantor and redistributor. When drought struck, the pharaoh could release stored grain to stabilize prices, a primitive form of monetary policy. Workers building the pyramids were paid in grain rations, creating what we'd now call a national wage system. Even taxes were collected in harvest shares, funneling wealth back into public projects. This wasn't just commerce, it was a total fusion of economy and governance, proving that money's value has always depended on the strength of the institutions behind it. Yet Egypt's system also reveals money's deepest paradox. Grain, unlike gold or silver, had intrinsic value. You could eat it, but once it entered the granaries, its worth became abstract, tied to faith in the system rather than the grain itself. Sound familiar? Today's dollars and digital currencies follow the same principle. Their power comes not from paper or pixels, but from our collective belief in the structures that issue them. The pharaohs understood this millennia ago. teaching us that money isn't just about what it's made of, it's about who stands behind it, ensuring that a handful of wheat, a clay token, or a line of code can hold the weight of an entire civilization. While the West clinked coins in their marketplaces, China was quietly rewriting the rules of money with something astonishingly light: sheets of paper. Picture a Tang Dynasty merchant in the 7th century, weary of hauling sacks of bronze coins just to buy a shipment of silk. Instead, he hands over a handwritten note promising payment, a simple piece of paper that would ignite a financial revolution. These early promissory notes, called fakian or flying cash, weren't just IOUs, they were the first flickers of an idea that would reshape global commerce. Money didn't have to be heavy to be valuable. By the time the Song dynasty took power in the 10th century, this innovation had evolved into something even bolder. The world's first government-issued paper currency. Imagine unrolling a jiaozi, a crisp banknote stamped with intricate designs and stern warnings against counterfeiting, its value backed not by the paper itself but by the full authority of the imperial treasury. For traders along the Silk Road, this was nothing short of magical. A single note could replace thousands of coins, slashing the risks of bandits and the back-breaking labor of transport. Markets flourished as never before, with money flowing as freely as the ink on these revolutionary notes. But like all great experiments, China's paper money faced its share of turbulence. When the Mongol Yuan dynasty took control, they cranked the printing presses into overdrive, flooding the economy with banknotes to fund lavish projects and military campaigns. The result, one of history's earliest recorded hyperinflations, where stacks of paper became worthless overnight. Yet even this failure proved something profound. The value of money hinges entirely on public trust and restraint. When emperors treated currency as a blank check rather than a sacred covenant, the system crumbled, a lesson modern central banks still grapple with today. What's remarkable is how prescient China's experiment was. Those Song dynasty banknotes operated on the same principle as today's dollars or euros, fiat currency, where value springs not from metal but from collective belief and institutional backing. The Chinese didn't just invent paper money, they uncovered the delicate alchemy that makes all money work, the balance between innovation and stability, between abundance and scarcity. Centuries before the West abandoned gold standards, China was already proving that money's true power lies not in what it's made of, but in the invisible threads of trust that bind an economy together. The bustling caravans of the Silk Road carried more than just silk and spices. They were mobile universities of finance, spreading revolutionary ideas about money across continents. Picture a Persian merchant in a crowded Samarkand marketplace, haggling not with local coins but with Roman denarii or Indian punch-marked silver. These weren't just exotic curiosities, they were testaments to an emerging truth: good money travels. As traders moved along these ancient highways, they unwittingly conducted a grand experiment in monetary Darwinism. The currencies that were reliable, consistent in weight, purity, and recognizability survived and spread, while unreliable ones faded into obscurity. What made these trade routes such powerful engines of financial innovation? Necessity. A trader from Constantinople couldn't expect a Chinese merchant to accept Byzantine gold without question. But when entire networks of merchants began trusting certain coins, those currencies became de facto standards. The Kushan Empire's gold dinars, stamped with bilingual inscriptions, became the Visa cards of their day, accepted from the Gangetic Plains to the Mediterranean shores. This wasn't just convenience, it was the birth of transnational trust. The Silk Road proved that money could be a cultural handshake, a way to say, we may not share a language or a god, but we agree on what this piece of metal represents. The ripple effects were profound. As currencies circulated, empires took notice. When Sasanian silver drachms appeared in Tang Dynasty China, rulers realized the power of minting coins that foreign traders would embrace. The result, a silent arms race of monetary quality, with kingdoms competing to produce the most trusted currency. The Gupta dynasty's meticulously pure gold coins weren't just economic tools, they were advertisements of imperial stability, designed to attract international commerce. Yet the real unsung heroes were the money changers, medieval forex brokers who set up tables along trade routes, their scales gleaming in the sun. These specialists didn't just convert currencies, they arbitrated value itself, creating the first exchange rates. Their ledgers were living maps of economic interconnectedness, showing how many dirhams equaled a dinar, or how much Song dynasty paper money could buy a sack of Central Asian saffron. In doing so, they built something revolutionary, a financial lingua franca that let a Venetian glassblower pay for Indian pepper with Arabic silver, all without anyone questioning the underlying value. This ancient globalization holds up a mirror to our digital age. Cryptocurrencies and mobile payment systems now flow across borders as effortlessly as Silk Road coins once did, facing the same challenges of trust and adoption. The lesson from history is clear. Money doesn't just reflect value, it builds bridges. When a Mongolian herdsman and a Persian artisan could agree on the worth of a single coin, they weren't just trading goods, they were weaving the first threads of a shared economic destiny, one that still binds us together today. The Greeks turned coins into canvases where economics met artistry in the palm of your hand. Picture a silver drachm from Athens, stamped with Athena's wise gaze on one side and her sacred owl on the other, each coin a tiny masterpiece declaring the city's identity. But these weren't just pretty trinkets. The owl's widespread recognition made it the ancient equivalent of a global brand, trusted from the Aegean to Egypt. Corinth went a step further, minting coins with Pegasus to celebrate its mythical heritage, while Syracuse flaunted sea nymphs and chariots, turning currency into propaganda. The message was clear. A state's coins weren't just money, they were miniature ambassadors of culture and power. Rome took this idea and scaled it to imperial proportions. When Julius Caesar became the first living ruler to stamp his profile on coins, it wasn't vanity, it was genius. Suddenly, every transaction from Britannia to Babylon doubled as a loyalty oath, with the emperor's face reminding subjects who held the reins. The denarius, Rome's signature silver piece, became the dollar of its day. Its consistency was legendary. A soldier on the Rhine frontier knew exactly how much bread his pay could buy, just as a merchant in Alexandria could price spices without haggling. This reliability knitted the empire's far-flung provinces into a single economic zone, where a coin minted in Spain held equal weight in Jerusalem. What set Rome apart wasn't just standardization, but durability. Their mints produced coins by the millions, some surviving 2 millennia with details still crisp. The secret, a militarized precision in production, dies cut by master engravers, blanks heated for cleaner strikes, and a bureaucracy that tracked every batch. When Nero famously debased the denarius by mixing in cheaper metals, the public outcry revealed how deeply Romans trusted their currency's integrity. This tension between stability and manipulation foreshadowed modern debates about inflation and monetary policy, proving that even ancient finance had its gray areas. The real legacy of these systems lies in their dual nature. Greek coins celebrated regional identity while facilitating Pan-Hellenic trade, a delicate balance between local pride and universal utility. Rome's currency, by contrast, was a tool of conquest disguised as commerce, binding diverse cultures through shared economic language. Together, they set the template for how nations would use money long after their empires fell, as instruments of unity, control, and sometimes, when the die struck just right, as tiny works of art that made everyday transactions feel like holding history in your hand. While Europe navigated the so-called Dark Ages, a brilliant financial renaissance was unfolding under Islamic rule, one that would redefine money's role in society. Picture the bustling souks of Baghdad in the 8th century, where merchants from Cordoba to Canton didn't just trade goods, they exchanged finely crafted gold dinars bearing Quranic verses alongside the caliph's name. These weren't mere coins, they were statements of principle, struck with meticulous precision, their weight and purity so reliable that a merchant in Mali could accept a dinar from Damascus without second-guessing its worth. But the real innovation wasn't in the metal, it was in the systems that grew around it. Enter the sack, a revolutionary predecessor to modern checks. Imagine a trader in Cairo depositing gold with a banker, then writing a note authorizing payment to a supplier in Basra, all without a single coin changing hands. This wasn't just convenience, it was financial alchemy, transforming trust into tangible value. Coupled with elaborate credit networks, these instruments powered trade across 3 continents, from the spice routes of Indonesia to the amber markets of Scandinavia. The genius lay in their flexibility. A sack could be endorsed like a bill of exchange, making it the plastic of its day, secure, portable, and universally accepted. What set this system apart was its ethical backbone. Islamic scholars like Al-Ghazali and Ibn Khaldun didn't just analyze economics, they infused it with moral philosophy. Their treatises condemned hoarding and exploitative interest, framing money as a social tool rather than an end in itself. Market inspectors called mutazib patrolled bazaars to ensure fair pricing and honest weights, blending commerce with accountability. Even the dinar's design carried symbolic weight, its circular shape representing the endless cycle of equitable exchange, a far cry from the arbitrary debasement common in other empires. The legacy of this golden age isn't just historical trivia. Those medieval Islamic credit systems laid groundwork for Renaissance banking houses like the Medici. The dinar dirham standard anticipated modern reserve currencies, enabling cross-border trade with remarkable efficiency. Most importantly, it proved money could be both powerful and principled, a lesson that resonates today as debates rage over ethical investing and cryptocurrency ethics. When you swipe a contactless payment or transfer funds digitally, you're walking a path first paved by merchants and scholars who saw finance not just as arithmetic, but as an extension of human dignity. Medieval Europe's economy began as a patchwork of local trades, a farmer swapping eggs for wool, a blacksmith bartering tools for grain. But beneath this seemingly simple system, cracks were forming. Try paying a foreign merchant with a dozen chickens or dividing a cow's worth into smaller purchases. The limitations of barter stifled growth, especially as trade routes expanded. Then came the game changer, bustling seasonal fairs in Champagne or Flanders, where merchants from Genoa to Bruges converged, their purses jingling with silver pennies minted by local lords. These coins, though inconsistent in quality, were a leap forward, a shared language of value that transcended village boundaries. The real transformation, however, sprouted in Italy's city-states. Venice and Florence didn't just trade goods, they traded promises. Picture a Florentine wool merchant buying dyes from Constantinople without shipping chests of coins across pirate-infested waters. Instead, he'd visit a banking house like the Medici, hand over local currency, and receive a bill of exchange, a slip of paper redeemable for gold at a partner bank overseas. This wasn't just convenient, it was revolutionary. bills of exchange acted as medieval wire transfers, reducing risk and fueling long-distance commerce. Suddenly, money could move faster than ships, weaving a financial web across Europe. At the heart of this system were two coins that became the euro of their day: Florence's golden florin and Venice's ducat. Struck with such consistent purity that their values rarely fluctuated, these coins gained universal trust. A Hungarian noble knew a florin's worth matched that in a Dutch trader's palm. Their reliability turned them into preferred currencies for everything from papal taxes to ransoming kings, proof that sound money could unite fractured realms. What's fascinating is how closely Europe's monetary evolution mirrored its political shifts. As feudalism waned, centralized banking rose. Kings, tired of unreliable baronial mints, began asserting royal control over coinage, much like modern governments regulate currency. The medieval money changers, once viewed with suspicion, became essential pillars of commerce, their ledger books foreshadowing today's stock exchanges. This wasn't just economic progress, it was societal transformation where trust in money began to outweigh trust in feudal oaths. The lesson from this era: financial innovation often follows the paths of necessity. From the chaos of barter to the sophistication of banking houses, Europe's journey shows how money evolves not through grand decrees, but through the daily needs of merchants, the pragmatism of bankers, and the unrelenting demand for systems that turn uncertainty into opportunity. Every time you swipe a credit card or transfer funds online, you're walking a path first paved by medieval traders who dared to imagine a world where value could travel lighter, faster, and farther than ever before. By the late 17th century, Europe's financial landscape was a powder keg of chaos. Kings debased coins to fund wars, currencies fluctuated wildly, and public trust in money crumbled like stale bread. Then came a quiet revolution in two unlikely places, Stockholm and London. Sweden's Riksbank, founded in 1668, wasn't just the world's first central bank, it was a lifeline for a kingdom drowning in clipped and counterfeit coins. Picture this: merchants hesitating to accept payment, unsure if the silver in their hands was genuine or a worthless imitation. The Riksbank's solution: issue standardized banknotes backed by the crown's full faith, creating a stable medium of exchange that restored confidence overnight. Across the North Sea, England faced a different crisis. King William Roman III wars against France had drained the treasury, leaving the government desperate for funds. Enter the Bank of England in 1694, a daring experiment where private investors pooled capital to lend to the state in exchange for interest. But this wasn't just a loan office, it became the guardian of England's monetary system. By holding gold reserves and regulating note issuance, the Bank of England did something unprecedented. It turned money from a haphazard tool into a calibrated instrument of national policy. The genius of these early central banks lay in their dual roles. They weren't just mints or treasuries, they acted as economic shock absorbers. When harvests failed or wars erupted, they could inject liquidity by issuing more notes or tighten supply to curb inflation, a primitive form of the monetary levers modern banks still use today. The Riksbank's notes, for example, carried a groundbreaking promise. They were redeemable for copper plate money, a tangible link between paper and metal that eased public skepticism. Meanwhile, the Bank of England's notes became so trusted that they circulated like gold itself, proving that value could be rooted in institutional credibility rather than just precious metals. What's often overlooked is how these institutions transformed the very concept of sovereignty. Before central banks, kings might seize private gold or debase coinage on a whim. Now, money became a contract between state and society, with banks as impartial referees. The Bank of England's independence, though limited by today's standards, set a template for keeping monetary policy separate from political whims. This delicate balance between authority and accountability would define economic stability for centuries, showing that money's true strength comes not from the stamp of a monarch, but from the integrity of the systems that manage it. Yet the road wasn't smooth. Early central banks faced crises that mirror modern dilemmas. When the Riksbank overissued notes, Sweden experienced one of Europe's first bouts of paper money inflation, a stark lesson in the dangers of unchecked printing. England's bank, meanwhile, navigated runs and panics that tested its gold reserves, foreshadowing the fragile trust underpinning all fractional reserve systems. These growing pains revealed a timeless truth. Central banking is as much an art as a science, requiring a dance between innovation and restraint. The legacy of this era lies in every dollar, euro, or yen we use today. Those 17th century bankers unknowingly built the scaffolding for modern finance, proving that money's power doesn't come from what it's made of, but from the institutions that stand behind it, ensuring that a slip of paper or a digital entry can hold the weight of an entire economy's trust. The shimmer of gold wasn't just a symbol of wealth in the 19th century, it was the bedrock of global finance. Imagine a world where every dollar, franc, or mark could be exchanged for a fixed amount of the precious metal, tying paper money to something tangible and unchanging. This was the gold standard, a system so powerful it turned currencies into interchangeable tokens of trust across borders. At its heart lay a simple promise: walk into any bank with a $20 bill and they'd hand you a precise weight of gold. That guarantee transformed trade, letting a British textile merchant sell to a German buyer without fretting over fluctuating exchange rates. Prices stayed stable, inflation remained tame, and for the first time, money felt as solid as the vaults holding its golden backbone. Britain didn't just adopt this system, it perfected it. The pound sterling, reliably convertible to gold since 1816, became the world's financial lingua franca. From the docks of Bombay to the cotton exchanges of New Orleans, contracts were written in pounds not out of habit, but because everyone knew its value wouldn't waver. The Bank of England acted as the system's guardian, adjusting interest rates to ensure gold reserves stayed balanced. When British demand for foreign goods spiked, higher rates attracted gold back to London like a magnet. This delicate dance made the pound the planet's first truly global currency, a status the dollar wouldn't challenge for over a century. Yet for all its brilliance, the gold standard had a flaw as stark as its glittering surface: rigidity. Economic shocks that today would prompt central banks to adjust money supply were met with stoic inaction. During harvest failures or industrial slumps, governments couldn't inject liquidity. Gold reserves were sacrosanct. The result: waves of brutal deflation where wages and prices spiraled downward, crushing workers and businesses alike. The Panic of 1873 exposed this weakness spectacularly. As banks collapsed across Europe and America, policymakers stood paralyzed, their hands tied by the very system designed to protect them. Money was stable, but at what cost? The tension between stability and flexibility reached a breaking point in World War I. Nations abandoned convertibility to print money for the war effort, revealing the gold standard's Achilles heel. It worked flawlessly in peacetime but collapsed under pressure. Post-war attempts to revive it, like Britain's painful return to gold in 1925, only deepened economic pain. Winston Churchill, then Chancellor of the Exchequer, famously lamented that restoring the pre-war exchange rate overvalued the pound, choking British exports. Meanwhile, France hoarded gold, and the Federal Reserve's missteps amplified the Great Depression. The system meant to prevent chaos now seemed to accelerate it. What's fascinating is how the gold standard's legacy still echoes today. Modern central banks target inflation with the same precision once reserved for gold reserves, but with crucial flexibility. Floating exchange rates absorb economic shocks instead of amplifying them, yet the allure of gold persists in cryptocurrency debates framed as digital gold, or in populist calls to return to the classic standard. The lesson isn't that gold was flawed, but that money at its core is a living system. It thrives not on unyielding rules, but on the ability to adapt while keeping trust intact. The gold standard didn't fail because it was weak. It fell because the world outgrew its constraints, proving that even the most glittering monetary anchors must eventually weigh the costs of their own perfection. The summer of 1944 painted an extraordinary scene. 700 delegates from 44 nations huddled in a quiet New Hampshire hotel, not to negotiate peace, but to redesign the world's financial architecture. Out of the ashes of World War II rose the Bretton Woods Agreement, a system that would anchor global currencies not to gold directly, but to the U.S. dollar, the only currency still backed by the precious metal. Picture the audacity of this move. Nations battered by war, their economies in shambles, collectively agreeing to tether their monetary futures to the strength of a single country's promise. The dollar didn't just become a currency, it became the linchpin of international trade, with every participating government pegging their money to it at fixed rates. Need to buy French francs or British pounds, you'd first convert your cash to dollars, as if the greenback was the financial equivalent of a universal adapter. This wasn't just convenience, it was a seismic power shift. For the first time in history, a national currency doubled as the world's reserve asset, giving America unparalleled influence. The mechanism was elegant in its simplicity. Foreign central banks could exchange their dollar reserves for gold at $35 an ounce, a pledge meant to inspire confidence. And it worked. The post-war economic boom, fueled by Marshall Plan dollars and the stability of fixed exchange rates, turned the mid-20th century into an era of unprecedented growth. Factories in Germany, vineyards in Italy, and docks in Japan hummed with activity, all underpinned by a system that made the dollar as good as gold. But cracks began to show as America's priorities shifted. The Vietnam War and ambitious social programs led to rampant money printing, flooding the globe with dollars. Foreign governments, led by France's skeptical Charles de Gaulle, started calling America's bluff, trading their swelling dollar reserves for actual gold. By 1971, Fort Knox's vaults were draining at an alarming rate. That August, President Nixon dropped the bombshell. The dollar would no longer be convertible to gold. Overnight, the Bretton Woods system collapsed, and the world stumbled into the era of fiat currencies, where money's value hinged entirely on government decree rather than metal backing. What's remarkable isn't that the system failed, but how the dollar emerged stronger. Without gold's constraints, the greenback became even more indispensable, buoyed by America's military might, technological innovation, and the sheer inertia of its global use. Oil traded in dollars cemented its dominance, ensuring that even as the gold window closed, the world had no real alternative. Bretton Woods had created a paradox. It designed a rules-based monetary order, only to prove that the real rule was power. When the dust settled, the lesson was clear. Money isn't just about economics. It's a mirror reflecting who holds the reins of influence. Today, as digital currencies and shifting alliances challenge the dollar's supremacy, the ghosts of Bretton Woods whisper a timeless truth. The fate of money is forever tied to the rise and fall of empires. The plastic rectangle in your wallet holds more power than any gold coin ever did, not because of what it's made of, but because of the invisible web of trust it represents. Credit cards, introduced in the 1950s by Diners Club, didn't just simplify payments, they redefined money as a stream of data. Swipe your card, and a merchant in Tokyo could verify your credit limit in New York within seconds. This wasn't just convenience, it was the first crack in the dam, letting the flood of digital finance rush in. Wire transfers, ATMs, and online banking turned money into something you couldn't drop or lose down a drain, a number on a screen, weightless and instant. Then came the earthquake, Bitcoin. In 2008, as the global financial system teetered on collapse, an anonymous figure named Satoshi Nakamoto published a white paper proposing a radical alternative, a currency with no central bank, no physical form, and no need for trust in institutions. Instead of relying on governments or banks to verify transactions, Bitcoin used blockchain technology, a decentralized ledger maintained by thousands of computers worldwide, each cross-checking the others. Imagine a crowd of strangers keeping perfect, tamper-proof records of every penny exchanged, no middlemen, no gatekeepers, just math and mutual agreement. For the first time since Lydia's coins, money wasn't just changing shape, it was shedding its very foundations. The implications are staggering. Traditional currencies derive value from government backing, the full faith and credit of a nation. Bitcoin's worth, by contrast, emerges purely from collective belief in its scarcity and utility. There will only ever be 21 million Bitcoins, a limit hardwired into its code like the unyielding rules of a gold standard, but without the vaults or the metal. This digital gold rush has spawned thousands of cryptocurrencies, from Ethereum's smart contracts to Dogecoin's meme-inspired frenzy, each testing new definitions of what money can be. Yet the real revolution isn't technological, it's philosophical. For millennia, money has been a contract between citizens and states, a tool of control as much as commerce. Cryptocurrencies flip that script, proposing a world where value flows peer-to-peer, bypassing borders and bureaucracies. When a Venezuelan farmer uses Bitcoin to shield savings from hyperinflation, or an artist sells digital artwork as an NFT for millions, they're participating in a quiet rebellion against the very idea of centralized money. But here's the twist: the more abstract money becomes, the more it reveals its true nature. Whether it's a clay tablet from Mesopotamia, a paper note from Song Dynasty China, or a string of code on a blockchain, money's power has never been in the object itself. It's in the stories we tell about it, the collective agreements that transform the mundane into the meaningful. The rise of digital currency isn't just changing how we pay, it's forcing us to confront a question as old as civilization. What do we value, and who gets to decide? King Croesus of Lydia didn't just rule a kingdom, he minted a revolution. Around 550 BC, this wealthy monarch took the electrum coins of his ancestors and did something radical. He separated the gold from the silver, creating the world's first bimetallic currency system. Picture the sun glinting off those pure gold staters, each stamped with the facing heads of a lion and a bull, a symbol so trusted it became synonymous with wealth itself. Rich as Croesus wasn't just a saying, it was a testament to how his coins became the universal language of value, circulating from the Aegean to Persia. But Croesus' genius wasn't just in precious metals, it was in understanding that money could be a tool of power. By controlling the mint, he didn't just facilitate trade, he cemented Lydia's dominance, proving that whoever shapes the currency shapes the world. Centuries later, another visionary emerged in the bustling markets of Baghdad. Muhammad ibn Musa al-Khwarizmi, the Persian mathematician whose name gave us the word algorithm, didn't just advance algebra, he revolutionized financial record-keeping. His systematic approaches to calculation laid the groundwork for double-entry bookkeeping, turning chaotic merchant ledgers into precise instruments of commerce. While kings hoarded gold, al-Khwarizmi's intellectual currency, the concept of balancing debits and credits became the invisible scaffolding of global trade. His story reminds us that monetary innovation isn't always about coins. Sometimes it's about the ideas that make those coins meaningful. Fast forward to Renaissance Florence, where a young banker named Cosimo de' Medici turned ledger entries into an empire. While contemporaries focused on counting florins, Cosimo grasped something deeper. Money's true power lies in movement. By perfecting bills of exchange, medieval IOUs that could travel across borders, he transformed his family's small bank into Europe's financial nervous system. A merchant in Bruges could deposit gold, and his partner in Venice would receive local currency within days, all thanks to Medici's network of trusted agents. This wasn't just banking, it was alchemy, turning trust into liquidity and laying the foundation for modern finance. Yet history's monetary heroes aren't all aristocrats or intellectuals. Consider the medieval moneychangers of Champagne's fairs, ordinary men who sat at wooden tables with scales and stacks of foreign coins. These unsung arbiters didn't just calculate exchange rates, they built the first forks markets, determining how many Venetian ducats equaled a French livre. Their daily decisions wove fragmented European economies into a cohesive whole, proving that money's value isn't decreed from above, it's negotiated in the gritty reality of human interaction. No discussion of monetary pioneers would be complete without John Maynard Keynes, the economist who rewrote the rules during the Great Depression. While gold standard adherents clung to austerity, Keynes dared to suggest that money should serve people, not dogma. His radical idea, governments could and should spend their way out of crises, using currency as a tool for stability rather than a sacred object. Though debated fiercely, his theories underpin the Bretton Woods system and still echo in central banks' responses to recessions today. Keynes understood what Croesus and the Medici knew instinctively: money is never neutral. It's a living, breathing expression of societal choices, and the visionaries who shape it leave fingerprints on history itself. From al-Khwarizmi's equations to Keynes' treatises, these figures share a common thread. They saw money not as an end but as a means. Whether through stamped metal, balanced ledgers, or economic theory, they recognized that currency's true value lies in its ability to connect, empower, and inspire. The next time you tap a payment app or glance at a price tag, remember, you're participating in a story written by kings, scholars, and merchants who dared to reimagine what money could be. The glitter of Rome's denarii wasn't just the shine of silver, it was the sound of an empire on the march. Every legionnaire's salary paid in these coins did more than fill their purses. It bought loyalty, funded conquests, and built the roads that stitched the Mediterranean world together. When Julius Caesar needed to cross the Rubicon, it wasn't just his soldiers who followed him, it was the promise of steady pay in reliable currency. The denarius became Rome's secret weapon, a tool of control sharper than any gladius. Conquered territories didn't just adopt Roman laws, they adopted Roman money, binding them to the empire's economy as tightly as its politics. But this power came at a cost. As emperors like Nero debased the coinage to fund lavish projects or endless wars, the trust that underpinned Rome's financial system began to crumble. Inflation crept in, soldiers grew restless, and the very currency that built the empire became a ticking time bomb beneath its foundations. Across the Atlantic centuries later, Spanish galleons heavy with Aztec and Incan silver sailed into Seville, turning a modest European kingdom into a global superpower overnight. The Potosi mines alone produced over 45,000 tons of silver, enough to bankroll armies, bribe diplomats, and fuel a century of European conflicts. Yet this flood of wealth carried a paradox. The more silver Spain spent, the less it was worth. Prices skyrocketed across Europe in the price revolution, as the sudden abundance of metal devalued currencies from London to Constantinople. Spain's treasure became its trap. Addicted to New World riches, it neglected domestic industry, leaving the empire vulnerable when the silver flows slowed. The lesson was brutal. Money could win wars, but without economic diversity, it couldn't sustain peace. World War II laid bare money's darkest duality. Nations printed currency at breakneck speeds to fund tanks and bombers, leading to hyperinflation that devastated civilian life. In Greece, prices doubled every few days, reducing banknotes to kindling. Germany's Weimar Republic had already shown the dangers in the 1920s, where wheelbarrows of marks couldn't buy a loaf of bread. Yet the same war also birthed financial innovations like the Bretton Woods system, proving that even in destruction, money could rebuild. The Marshall Plan's dollars didn't just reconstruct Europe's cities, they restored faith in the very idea of stable currency. This push and pull between creation and destruction reveals money's true nature. It's neither inherently good nor evil, but a mirror reflecting the ambitions of those who wield it. When Alexander the Great melted Persian gold into his own coins, he wasn't just funding an army, he was rewriting the economic map of the ancient world. When the British Empire tied its pound to gold, it wasn't just stabilizing trade, it was anchoring global power in London's vaults. Even today, economic sanctions prove that freezing access to currency can be deadlier than any siege. The thread connecting these moments is clear: control the money and you control the fate of nations. Yet for all its potential as a weapon, money's most enduring power lies in its ability to unite. The euro, for all its controversies, binds 20 nations in a shared financial destiny. Cryptocurrencies now challenge borders altogether, creating communities of trust that transcend governments. The history of money in warfare isn't just a tale of plunder and inflation, it's a reminder that the same tool used to build walls can also build bridges. Whether stamped with Caesar's profile or encrypted in blockchain, currency remains humanity's most potent invention, one that can raise empires or raise them up depending on the hands that hold it. On the tiny Pacific island of Yap, wealth wasn't carried in pockets it couldn't be. Imagine limestone discs taller than a person, some weighing as much as a car, quarried from distant islands and painstakingly transported by canoe. These rye stones, with their intricate carvings and towering presence, weren't just currency, they were monuments to social status. The genius of the system lay in its flexibility. A stone too heavy to move might change ownership without ever leaving its spot. The entire community simply acknowledged the transfer through oral tradition. This wasn't just money, it was a collective memory bank where value existed in the minds of the people as much as in the physical object. Half a world away, the Aztecs built an empire on a humbler form of wealth: cacao beans. Prized for their use in ritual drinks and as a luxury good, these beans became small change currency across Mesoamerica. A turkey might cost 100 beans, a tamale just one. But cacao's real power came from its dual role. It was both sustenance and symbol, edible yet enduring. Unlike gold, which the Aztecs considered merely decorative, cacao beans had intrinsic value. They couldn't be counterfeited, unlike hollow gold dust-filled goose quills Spanish colonists later tried passing off, and their perishability kept the money supply in check, nature's inflation control. Then there were the cowrie shells, smooth and gleaming like porcelain, that flowed from the Maldives across Africa and Asia. In the kingdom of Dahomey, a single slave might be purchased for 20,000 shells. Chinese emperors used them as tax payments, while West African merchants strung them into elaborate headdresses that doubled as walking bank accounts. Cowries worked because they were durable, portable, and just rare enough to prevent overabundance until European traders flooded markets with shiploads, collapsing their value. The shell's downfall reveals a timeless truth. Scarcity breeds trust, and when that vanishes, so does the currency's power. Fast forward to today's digital age, where cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin echo these ancient innovations in surprising ways. Just as rye stones derived value from communal agreement rather than physical utility, blockchain currencies gain worth through decentralized consensus. Like cacao beans, some digital tokens serve dual purposes. Ethereum's Ether fuels smart contracts while acting as tradable assets. And much like cowrie shells, cryptocurrencies walk a tightrope between scarcity and accessibility, with their values swinging based on perception and adoption rates. What connects these disparate systems isn't material but mentality. Whether stone, bean, shell, or code, money thrives when a community decides explicitly or implicitly to believe in its worth. The Yepes stones teach us that value can be entirely abstract. The Aztec beans show how utility anchors trust. The cowries' rise and fall demonstrate the delicate balance between supply and confidence. Now, as we stand at the crossroads of physical and digital currencies, these historical experiments remind us that money isn't just about what we use. It's about who we are, what we prioritize, and how we choose to trust one another across time and space. The next chapter of currency won't be written by economists alone, but by all of us, voting with every transaction in an unspoken referendum on what we truly value. A crisp German banknote from 1923 tells a story no spreadsheet ever could, not in its printed numbers, but in the frantic zeros added by hand as hyperinflation spiraled out of control. At the height of the crisis, prices doubled every 49 hours, turning life savings into wallpaper. Workers rushed to spend wages the moment they were paid, knowing their purchasing power evaporated by the hour. Yet the real tragedy wasn't the worthless paper. It was the collapse of something far more fragile, the shared belief that money meant anything at all. This wasn't just an economic failure. It was a psychological rupture, proving that currency's true foundation isn't gold or government decrees, but the unshakable faith of the people who use it. Zimbabwe's $20 trillion notes in 2008 reveal the same brutal lesson. When trust in institutions crumbles, so does the value of money, no matter how many zeros are printed. A loaf of bread costing millions sounds absurd until you realize it's not about the number, but the collective gasp of a society watching its financial reality warp beyond recognition. These aren't isolated incidents, they're stress tests for humanity's most audacious social contract, the agreement that a piece of paper, a metal disc, or a digital entry can represent something real. Behavioral economists like Daniel Kahneman have shown how irrational our relationship with money truly is. We'll drive across town to save $10 on a $50 item, but won't bother for the same savings on a $1,000 purchase, even though the value gained is identical. We treat cash differently than credit, fear losses more than we crave gains, and cling to physical currency long after digital options prove superior. These quirks aren't glitches, they're features of a system built on human psychology rather than pure logic. The magic of money lies in this paradox. It's simultaneously one of our most concrete and abstract inventions. A child understands that coins buy ice cream, yet philosophers still debate what gives those coins worth. Ancient societies used seashells, modern ones use blockchain tokens, but the mechanism remains unchanged. Value emerges when enough people agree it exists. Cryptocurrencies' wild price swings aren't so different from tulip mania in 17th century Holland or beanie baby frenzies in the 1990s. Each episode underscores that money, at its core, is a mirror reflecting our deepest hopes, fears, and above all, our willingness to trust not just systems but each other. What's astonishing isn't that monetary systems sometimes fail, but that they ever work at all. Every time you hand a stranger a $20 bill for coffee, you're participating in a silent act of faith that the next person will honor its value, and the next, in an unbroken chain stretching back to the first trade. That fragile thread of trust woven through every transaction in human history is the real currency we've been exchanging all along. The glittering halls of medieval Europe's castles hid a stark financial truth. Money wasn't just a tool for trade, but a weapon of control. Feudal lords hoarded gold and silver, while serfs toiled for scraps, their labor repaid in kind rather than coin. This wasn't just an economic system. It was a social straitjacket where birth dictated access to wealth as rigidly as castle walls divided nobility from peasantry. Yet even then, cracks appeared in the monolith. When Italian city-states began minting smaller denominations in the 13th century, suddenly a cobbler or weaver could save and trade beyond their village, chipping away at the aristocracy's monopoly. The invention of interest-bearing loans, though condemned by the church, secretly empowered merchants to climb the social ladder, proving that money, once unleashed, could erode even the most entrenched hierarchies. Fast forward to the Industrial Revolution, where steam-powered printing presses churned out banknotes as quickly as factories churned out goods. For the first time, middle-class families could access credit, invest in ventures, and even weather financial storms with savings accounts. The Rothschilds and Rockefellers might have dominated headlines, but the real revolution was quieter. The democratization of financial tools that let a shopkeeper's son dream of owning a warehouse, or a seamstress save for her daughter's education. Yet this progress came with shadows. Colonial empires extracted wealth from enslaved and indentured labor, weaving inequality into the very fabric of global finance. The same railroads and stock markets that built fortunes for some were funded by the exploitation of others, a paradox that still haunts modern economies. Enter Bitcoin's promise, a currency without gatekeepers, where anyone with a smartphone could transact globally, free from banks or borders. In Venezuela and Zimbabwe, where hyperinflation wiped out life savings, cryptocurrencies became lifelines, digital mattresses for stashing value beyond government reach. But the utopian vision hit hard realities. Early adopters reaped windfalls, while latecomers faced volatile swings that mirrored the stock market's wildest days. Mining pools concentrated power in the hands of a few, and the very anonymity designed to protect users became a tool for laundering and fraud. The irony stings. A system created to bypass inequality risks replicating it in code, proving that no monetary innovation is immune to human nature's gravitational pull. What these twists reveal is money's double-edged nature. It can be a ladder for mobility or a barricade guarding privilege, depending on who designs the rules. Microfinance loans in Bangladesh show how tiny injections of capital can lift entire villages, while payday lending traps in Detroit prove how predatory systems bleed the vulnerable dry. The difference isn't in the currency itself, but in the structures surrounding it: the interest rates, the regulations, the education that turns money from a mystery into a tool. The ethical question lingers like a ghost in the ledger. Can any monetary system truly be neutral when it's built by societies riddled with biases? Swiss bank accounts hide fortunes while mobile money in Kenya empowers farmers, two sides of the same coin. Perhaps the answer lies not in searching for perfect systems, but in constantly questioning who benefits and who's left behind. After all, the history of money isn't just a chronicle of coins and contracts. It's the story of who gets to write the rules and who's forced to play by them. The rivers of ancient Lydia once shimmered with electrum, nature's perfect alloy of gold and silver, washed down from the mountains and waiting to be scooped into the palms of eager prospectors. This effortless bounty came at little ecological cost, but the same can't be said for today's pursuit of precious metals. Modern gold mining scars landscapes with open pits the size of city blocks, consumes enough electricity annually to power entire countries, and poisons waterways with mercury and cyanide. For every ounce of gold extracted enough to make a single wedding ring, 20 tons of ore must be processed, leaving behind toxic sludge and deforestation. The irony stings. The very materials we've trusted to represent value for millennia now devalue the ecosystems that sustain us. Delve deeper, and the environmental ledger grows more unsettling. Paper money, seemingly benign, relies on cotton farming that guzzles water and pesticides, while the ink and anti-counterfeiting chemicals introduce their own toxic trail. Even digital transactions, often touted as clean, hide a carbon footprint in the sprawling server farms that process payments each swipe and click, drawing electricity from grids still largely fueled by coal and gas. Then there's Bitcoin, the modern-day alchemy turning electricity into digital gold. The cryptocurrency's energy appetite rivals entire nations, Argentina or Sweden, depending on market activity, with mining rigs burning through fossil fuels to solve complex mathematical puzzles. What began as an abstract alternative to traditional banking now demands more power than some countries produce, raising an uncomfortable question: can any form of wealth exist without costing the earth? Yet glimmers of innovation suggest a path forward. Sweden's push toward a cashless society isn't just about convenience, it's a conscious calculation that digital transactions, when powered by renewables, leave a lighter footprint than printing and transporting physical krona. Costa Rica's green blockchain experiments use surplus geothermal energy to mine cryptocurrencies cleanly, turning volcanic heat into digital assets without the usual emissions. Even gold is getting an ethical makeover, with startups like Fairmind certifying responsibly sourced metal dug by small-scale miners using mercury-free techniques. These pioneers prove that money's next evolution might not be in form, but in philosophy, valuing sustainability as highly as scarcity. The real breakthrough, however, lies in reimagining money's fundamental purpose. Indigenous communities from the Amazon to Alaska have long used systems where wealth is tied to ecological health, like the forest coins of Brazil's Ashaninka people, which gain value when trees thrive. Modern equivalents are emerging. Carbon-backed currencies reward emission reductions, while regenerative finance platforms invest in coral reef restoration or soil regeneration as living assets. This isn't just tweaking the system, it's rewriting money's DNA to measure prosperity not in extracted resources, but in restored ones. The challenge now is scaling these ideas beyond niches, forging a monetary paradigm where every transaction heals rather than harms, because the ultimate currency we trade in isn't metal or data, but the future itself. The moment the first coin was minted, a shadow industry was born. Ancient Rome's denarii, struck with the profiles of emperors, were meticulously shaved along their edges by fraudsters, just enough to collect precious metal dust while keeping the coin in circulation. These subtle thefts were so rampant that authorities began adding serrated edges to coins, a defensive flourish we still see on quarters today. But the battle didn't stop there. Medieval kings embedded silk threads in banknotes. Renaissance engravers hid microscopic signatures in their designs, and colonial mints added watermarks so delicate they seemed to float within the paper itself. Each innovation was a direct response to the cunning of counterfeiters, proving that money's survival depends as much on artistry as it does on economics. Fast forward to the Industrial Age, and the stakes grew exponentially. When Napoleon's government flooded Britain with forged banknotes to destabilize its economy, the Bank of England retaliated with a masterstroke, portraits so intricate they took master engravers months to complete. The Victorian-era white fiver featured a translucent window, a nearly impossible feat of papermaking that turned currency into a canvas of light and shadow. Yet for every security measure, counterfeiters adapted. The most audacious heist, the Nazis' Operation Bernhard during World War II, where concentration camp prisoners were forced to produce near-perfect replicas of British pounds, flooding the market with enough fake notes to threaten the Allies' financial stability. Today's digital frontier has rewritten the rules of the game entirely. Cryptocurrencies, designed to be tamper-proof through blockchain, now face double-spend attacks and phishing scams. Central banks deploy holographic strips and color-shifting ink, while fraudsters use high-resolution scanners and chemical washes to mimic them. The irony is palpable. The more sophisticated money becomes, the more ingenuity thieves muster. Even the humble credit card isn't safe. Skimming devices no bigger than a thumbnail can clone your data in seconds, turning plastic into a liability. What's revealing isn't just the technological arms race, but the psychological undercurrent. A 3,000-year-old Persian coin and a modern $100 bill share one critical trait. Their value collapses the moment people doubt their authenticity. That's why the U.S. Treasury doesn't just update its security features, it publicizes them, running ad campaigns to teach citizens how to spot fakes. Trust isn't passive, it's a ritual of verification, repeated every time we hold a bill up to the light or check a watermark. The most profound shift, though, may be in how we define fraud itself. In an era where money is often just a number on a screen, counterfeiting has evolved into identity theft and ransomware. Hackers don't need to print fake bills when they can hijack bank transfers or manipulate stock algorithms. The lesson: money's greatest vulnerability isn't the paper or the metal, it's the systems that move it. As we enter an age of central bank digital currencies and AI-generated deepfakes, the age-old dance between security and deception continues, reminding us that the fight for trust is the one war finance can never afford to lose. Central banks around the world are quietly conducting an experiment that could redefine money itself, not with coins or paper, but with lines of code. Imagine a digital dollar or euro issued directly by the Federal Reserve or European Central Bank, programmable to track every transaction or even expire if unused. This isn't science fiction. Over 100 countries are currently exploring central bank digital currencies, with the Bahamas' Sand Dollar and Nigeria's e-Naira already in circulation. The pitch is compelling: instant settlements, reduced fraud, and financial inclusion for the unbanked. But beneath the sleek promises lies a dilemma. How much efficiency are we willing to trade for privacy? When China's digital yuan automatically deducts parking fines or rewards social credit approved purchases, it offers a glimpse of both the convenience and the creeping surveillance possible with state-controlled digital money. The tension between innovation and autonomy plays out in every CBDC design choice. Unlike cryptocurrencies that run on decentralized blockchains, these digital currencies are centralized by definition, every transaction potentially visible to authorities. Sweden's e-krona pilot allows small anonymous payments but traces larger ones, while the European Central Bank proposes anonymity vouchers for minor transactions. These compromises reveal the tightrope walk at the heart of the project, how to harness blockchain's efficiency without sacrificing the anonymity that cash provides. After all, the untraceable $20 bill isn't just a tool for illicit activity. It's what lets you buy a surprise gift without algorithms predicting your next purchase or donate to controversial causes without scrutiny. Cryptocurrencies loom over this debate like rebellious siblings. Bitcoin's very existence was a protest against centralized control, yet its volatility and energy thirst make it impractical for daily use. Stablecoins, crypto tokens pegged to traditional assets tried to bridge the gap, but their collapses in 2022 exposed the risks of private companies playing central banker. Now governments are racing to co-opt the best of both worlds. The European Union's digital euro would allow offline peer-to-peer transfers mimicking cash, while Jamaica's CBDC processes transactions in seconds without internet access. The message is clear: nation-states won't cede monetary sovereignty to Silicon Valley or anonymous crypto developers without a fight. What's often missed in this technological arms race is how profoundly our relationship with money could shift. Programmable CBDC could automate tax payments or distribute stimulus funds instantly during crises, but could also enable negative interest rates that penalize saving. Smart contracts might streamline mortgages yet also allow authorities to freeze assets with a keystroke. Even the concept of expiration dates on currency, proposed by some economists to stimulate spending, raises Orwellian questions about who gets to decide when money dies. The irony is stark. The same governments that once stamped their faces on coins to assert power now wield algorithms that could reshape economic behavior invisibly. Yet for all the dystopian potential, CBDC also harbor transformative promise. In developing nations where predatory lenders charge exorbitant fees, a free digital wallet from the central bank could be revolutionary. Migrant workers sending remittances might save billions in transfer fees with instant cross-border CBDC transactions. Some prototypes even explore embedding climate incentives, automatically rewarding carbon-friendly purchases with tax rebates. The choice isn't between adopting or rejecting digital currency, but between building systems that empower or surveil. The coming decade will test a foundational belief that money should be both a tool and a right. As physical cash dwindles in countries like Sweden and South Korea, we're approaching a fork in the road. One path leads to money that's frictionless but controlled, the other to chaotic innovation with risks and rewards. Perhaps the real future lies in the messy middle, a hybrid ecosystem where cash, CBDC, and cryptocurrencies jostle for dominance, each appealing to different values of convenience, privacy, or independence. One thing's certain: the quiet revolution happening in central bank labs today will determine whether the money of tomorrow feels like a public utility or a panopticon, and that choice will shape economies long after the technology itself becomes invisible. Rome's silver denarius began as a triumph of reliability, each coin pure enough to be trusted from Britannia to Babylon. But as emperors faced mounting wars and lavish building projects, they succumbed to temptation. Nero started shaving silver content, mixing in cheaper metals to stretch supplies. By the 3rd century, what passed for a denarius was little more than copper dipped in silver wash, its value collapsing alongside public faith. Soldiers demanded higher wages to compensate, prices spiraled, and the empire's economic glue dissolved into chaos. This wasn't just inflation, it was the unraveling of a social pact where the state's credibility had been stamped into every coin until it wasn't. Centuries later, Weimar Germany's hyperinflation turned money into a punchline. Workers rushed to spend wages the moment they were paid, pushing wheelbarrows of worthless marks to buy a loaf of bread. The trigger, a perfect storm of war reparations, reckless money printing, and a government desperate to placate unrest. Yet the deeper lesson wasn't about numbers, it was about trust. When people saw their life savings evaporate overnight, they didn't just lose wealth, they lost belief in the system itself. Banknotes became wallpaper, not because the paper changed, but because the collective faith behind it had vanished. Venezuela's recent collapse offers a modern echo. Sitting on the world's largest oil reserves, the bolivar should have been resilient, but political mismanagement, price controls, and rampant currency printing led to inflation so severe that bills lost value faster than printers could issue them. In 2018, the government lopped 5 zeros off the currency, a futile reset that ignored the root problem. Money's value isn't in its digits, but in the institutions that sustain it. When supermarkets started weighing bolivars instead of counting them, it wasn't just an economic failure, it was a societal breakdown where the very tool meant to facilitate trade became a symbol of dysfunction. These collapses share a chilling pattern. Whether it's Rome diluting coins or Zimbabwe printing trillion-dollar notes, the culprit is always oversupply, flooding the system with money that outpaces real value. But the true catalyst is subtler. The moment people notice, currency thrives on collective suspension of disbelief. When that illusion shatters, panic accelerates the crash. Medieval monarchs clipping gold florins learned this the hard way, as did revolutionary France with its assignats paper money backed by confiscated church lands until the paper outweighed the land's worth. Yet history's darkest monetary failures also reveal resilience. Post-war Germany's introduction of the Deutschmark in 1948 was less about the new bills themselves and more about the psychological reset they represented. Citizens traded in old Reichsmarks at a fraction of their face value, accepting brutal losses to buy into a system with hard limits on printing. It worked because the pain of the reset promised future stability, a lesson Argentina keeps relearning with its cyclical currency crises. The thread connecting these episodes isn't just about economics, it's about human nature. Money is the ultimate shared fiction, a story we tell ourselves about value. When leaders treat that story as expendable, whether to fund wars, cling to power, or mask mismanagement, the plot twists into tragedy. But when societies rebuild, they don't just restore currencies, they restore covenants, proving that the most stable monetary system isn't the one with the most gold, but the one with the most collective buy-in. After all, a coin is just metal until enough people agree it's something more. Scrooge McDuck diving into his vault of gold coins isn't just a cartoon moment. It's a cultural fantasy etched into our collective imagination. That gleeful plunge captures something primal, the visceral thrill of abundance, the sheer sensory joy of money as something you can swim in, touch, and conquer. Yet flip the channel to Walter White's mountain of dirty cash in Breaking Bad, and the same piles of currency morph into something sinister, a physical manifestation of moral decay. This duality, money as both dream and nightmare, plays out everywhere from Dickensian tales to hip-hop anthems, reflecting our tangled relationship with wealth. Take The Wolf of Wall Street, where stacks of $100 bills fuel hedonistic excess, or It's a Wonderful Life, where George Bailey's building and loan represents money as a force for community salvation. These stories aren't just entertainment, their morality plays wrestling with a central question. Does money amplify who we are or distort it? Even children's fables like King Midas warn of wealth's isolating curse, while The Great Gatsby spins gold into tragedy, showing how the pursuit of riches can hollow out the soul. The tension is timeless. We're drawn to the glitter but wary of the cost. Music, too, dances on this razor's edge. Hip-hop's love affair with luxury, think Cardi B's Money or 50 Cent's get rich or die trying, celebrates financial triumph as rebellion, a way to flip systemic oppression on its head. Meanwhile, Pink Floyd's Money laments the dehumanizing grind of consumerism, and Dolly Parton's 9 to 5 turns the daily slog for wages into a rallying cry. The paradox is striking. The same dollar bills symbolize freedom in one verse and bondage in the next. Dig deeper, and you'll find myths threading these ideas across millennia. The Norse god Odin didn't hoard gold, he gave it away to forge alliances, treating wealth as social glue. Chinese folklore's money-loving Cation isn't a villain but a deity whose blessings bring prosperity without moral strings. These narratives hint at a truth often lost in modern angst. Money itself isn't good or evil. It's a blank canvas absorbing the values of those who wield it. What makes these portrayals so gripping isn't their extravagance but their relatability. Everyone knows the anxiety of a dwindling bank balance or the giddiness of an unexpected windfall. When The Simpsons parodies greed with Mr. Burns or Parasite contrasts basement poverty with modernist wealth, they tap into universal fears and desires. Even reality TV, from Shark Tank to Keeping Up with the Kardashians, turns finance into voyeuristic spectacle, blurring the line between aspiration and exploitation. The takeaway: our stories about money are really stories about power, identity, and survival. They reveal the quiet rules we live by: who deserves wealth, what it costs to get it, and whether it's ever enough. Next time you see a movie heist or hear a rapper flaunt a money gun, remember, you're not just watching a plot device. You're seeing humanity's oldest drama play out anew, where every coin toss carries the weight of 1,000 whispered hopes and warnings. From the riverbeds of Lydia, where electrum first gleamed in the palms of traders, to the invisible algorithms of blockchain humming in server farms today, money has always been more than a tool. It's a mirror reflecting humanity's boldest leaps. Each chapter in this epic, the clay tablets of Mesopotamia, the paper promises of Song Dynasty China, the gold-backed dollars of Bretton Woods, reveals the same truth. Currency isn't about what we use, but what we believe. The cowrie shells strung across ancient trade routes and the QR codes flashing in modern markets share a common thread, an unspoken pact that value can live in objects, numbers, or even ideas, as long as enough of us agree to honor the illusion. Now we stand at the edge of a new frontier, where central banks experiment with digital currencies and cryptocurrencies promise liberation from traditional systems. But the real revolution isn't in the technology, it's in the questions it forces us to confront. Who gets to control money in a digital age? Can algorithms fairly distribute what kings and governments once ruled? The past offers cautionary tales. Rome's denarius collapsed under the weight of imperial greed, while Weimar Germany's hyperinflation turned savings into confetti. Yet history also shows our capacity for reinvention. The Medici's bills of exchange birthed modern banking, and the gold standard's fall ushered in an era of unprecedented global trade. The future of money won't be decided by coders or policymakers alone. It's a story we're all writing every time we tap a payment app, invest in crypto, or even choose to barter skills in a local time bank. Will privacy endure in an age of traceable digital transactions? Can we design currencies that prioritize sustainability over endless growth? The answers lie in the choices of billions: consumers, voters, innovators, each nudging the needle toward inclusion or exclusion, transparency or control. One thing is certain: the next evolution of money will surprise us. Perhaps it's a universal basic income powered by blockchain, or a carbon-backed currency that rewards green choices. Maybe it's something we haven't yet imagined: a system as radical to us as Lydia's coins were to bartering farmers. But whatever form it takes, the core challenge remains unchanged: to build systems that don't just move wealth, but nourish trust, empower communities, and reflect our highest aspirations. As the screens light up with another crypto boom or central bank announcement, remember, you're not just watching history unfold, you're shaping it. So tell us in the comments, what do you want the next chapter of money to look like? And if you've enjoyed this journey from ancient markets to digital frontiers, hit subscribe for more adventures into the hidden forces that shape our world. The past is prologue, but the future, that's ours to mint.